Deus adiuta Romanis. May God help the Romans. Jerusalem has fallen, the true cross has been captured, and the Christian world is mobilizing forces for a reconquest. No, I'm not talking about those 12th century crusades that are probably animating your mind right now, but rather I'm speaking of an often overseen military conflict that can be viewed as a precursor to the Crusades, before there were Western Christians versus Muslims in the medieval Middle East. The event I'm referring to is known to us today as the Byzantine Sassanian War of 602 to 628, or simply put, a conflict between the Romans who lived in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Persians who lived in modern-day Iraq and Iran under the Sassanian dynasty. Now, by the end of this video, you will not only know why this 26-year war was fought and what became of the true cross, but how this war unintentionally propelled the spread of Islam, a religion which nearly 2 billion people adhere to today. An argument can be made that this recapture of Jerusalem was a proto-crusade, a prequel of sorts, a crusade before crusading was a thing. Some 300 years before the outbreak of this war, a famous artifact was unearthed. According to Christian writers like Eusebius, Socrates Scholasticus, and Theodoret, the first Christian emperor of Rome, Constantine, issued his mother, Empress Helena, a mission. Her quest was to find Christian holy sites in the Roman province of Judea, renamed Syria-Palestine following a Jewish revolt ruthlessly suppressed by Emperor Hadrian 200 years prior. Likewise, this emperor refounded Jerusalem as a Roman colony called Aelia Capitolina, banished Jews from entering the city, and set up pagan shrines in Jewish and Christian holy sites as a means to eradicate Jewish separatism at its roots. Now, fast forwarding when Helena entered Jerusalem, her son Constantine had ordered for the pagan shrines to be demolished and for churches to be built upon Christian holy sites. Helena would identify these locations where the Ascension, Assumption, Birth, and Crucifixion likely took place. Christian writers purport that after the Temple of Venus, which had been erected by Hadrian, was torn down, the hill of Jesus' crucifixion and the tomb in which he was buried were then exposed. Constantine then requested that the true cross itself be found. Our accounts are somewhat contradictory, but in essence, our writers say that a Jewish guide named Judas led Helena to discover 3 crosses within or near the sepulchre once the pagan shrine was demolished. But which was the true cross? There are 3 of them. Either Helena or the Bishop of Jerusalem, Macarius, had a terminally ill woman touch each of the crosses to find out which was the real deal. Once she touched the 3rd cross, she was fully healed. With mission accomplished, the Bishop of Jerusalem installed the cross within a silver reliquary and housed it inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Helena had splinters of the cross sent to various bishops across the Christian world and sailed back to Constantinople with a fragment of the cross as well as the 3 nails. This particular relic, along with other Christian holy sites, supercharged the Levant with Christian activity, venerations, and pilgrimages. It's important to note that while these early Christian sources provide an account of the discovery of the true cross, they are primarily religious texts rather than contemporary historical records. Now let's fast forward some 300 years to when the Romans began their quest to reclaim the true cross. In 602, the Eastern Romans were in a crisis. Their emperor Maurice and his family were butchered by disgruntled soldiers led by Phocas, who in turn became the new emperor. Khosrow II, the Shah of Persia, chose not to pass up the opportunity to exploit the empire's division and conquer Roman lands, and regain old Persian ones. As the Persians pushed deeper into Roman territory, destabilizing Constantinople's vital eastern provinces, the governor of Roman Africa and his son Heraclius led an insurrection against Emperor Phocas. Heraclius won his civil war, executed Phocas, and was crowned Emperor of the Romans. Allegedly, before Phocas's death, Heraclius taunted the emperor, asking, "Is this how you have ruled, wretch?" The demeaned emperor replied, "And will you do better?" And this question rang true for the first decade of Heraclius' reign, which saw the Levant, Egypt, and Anatolia fall to the Persians, while Slavs and Avars raided the Balkans. Upon the Persian conquest of Jerusalem, the Church of Christ's tomb was reportedly destroyed, as were a number of Christian holy sites. And most staggering for the Romans, the Sassanian army captured the true cross and transported it, along with many inhabitants, back to Persia as spoils of war. By this point, not only was the cross lost, but so was the near entirety of the empire. This conflict was not just the usual skirmish over border regions. This was a war of survival. The Eastern Romans were experiencing the darkest moment of their history. I opened this video with a silver coin, a Byzantine hexagram, with the haunting words, "May God help the Romans." Heraclius minted this currency during these bleakest days of his reign. Rome's enemies were at the very doorsteps of Constantinople itself when Heraclius questioned if he should indeed yield to Khosrow and subject his own people to Persian overlordship. The Byzantines and Sassanians did agree upon some terms, in that Constantinople would pay the Shah a hefty tribute in exchange for peace. But during this quiet time, Heraclius, with the permission of Patriarch Sergius, Bishop of Constantinople, began melting down church treasures, centralized the Roman economy, and cut non-military spending to fund his empire's rearmament process. 622 to 628 marked one of the greatest comebacks ever seen in military history. Now, with a retrained Roman army, Heraclius launched counterattacks into Anatolia, Armenia, and Mesopotamia. Moreover, this was not just a typical Roman war of reconquest. No, under Heraclius, combat took on a spiritual dimension. Heraclius is going to defeat the enemies of God, restore Rome's territories, including Jerusalem, and take back the true cross. On campaign, the emperor guided his troops with a sacred icon of Christ on his military banners. Heraclius declared that Christian soldiers who died in this war would become martyrs. This emperor was molding a war of reconquest into a war of Christian triumph, a holy war, or a crusade, if you will. The emperor started by penetrating deep into the Persian heartland, blitzing Sassanian armies with his lighter yet more cohesive troops. Out of vengeance for the destruction of Christian sites in Jerusalem, Heraclius' soldiers sacked and destroyed the major Zoroastrian fire temple of Adur-Gushnasp. While the Romans campaigned in the Persian interior, one Sassanian army group went straight for the jugular, the conquest of Constantinople itself. But even when the city was besieged by the Avars and Slavs on one side and the Persians on the other, the Patriarch Sergius led the successful defense of the capital. The Persians were now on the back foot, with Heraclius slugging it out in Armenia, Assyria, and Persia, winning a slew of victories, culminating in his decisive win at Nineveh, near modern-day Mosul, Iraq. These victories, coupled with incursions from Turkic tribes in northeast Persia, as well as mounting discontent and feuding among the Persian high command, put insurmountable pressure on the Shah to end the war. However, before Khosrow could make a decision, he was killed in a coup and replaced by his son, Kavad II, who quickly sued for peace and returned all the captured land, loot, and peoples back to the Romans, including the true cross. Celebrations quickly ensued across the Roman Empire. However, our historical narratives seem to contradict each other regarding the placement of the true cross. Following the war's conclusion, it seems that Heraclius paraded the cross in his triumphal procession in Constantinople, before placing it in the Church of the Holy Apostles. But in another account, he is centered in Jerusalem and restores the cross in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, among a throng of celebrants. And not everyone was in a celebratory mood either. According to Theophanes, Heraclius forced the Jews living in the city to convert to Christianity due to several of their number supporting the Persians when they had invaded years back. This scene bears some eerie foreshadowing of the brutality that the Crusaders would unleash on the Jewish and Muslim inhabitants of Jerusalem in 1099. So when evaluating either account, the cross's recovery proved to be a major symbolic victory for the Byzantines as a commemoration of their hard-fought victory over their non-Christian enemies. And although the Romans had regained their lands, won back the true cross, and established peace with the Persians, both empires would be too weak to resist the armies of Islam, who made their brazen introduction onto the world stage of Afro-Eurasian power politics only 5 years after this Romano-Persian peace treaty. If you would like to hear more about the legacy of Rome, click this video right here to see more. Like, comment, share, subscribe. See you next time.